Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Susie Knight, and together with Sarah Willis, we are proud to co-chair the second 2020 Women on Boards Conversation on Board Diversity. Thank you for your support and for being here today. During this pandemic crisis, we hope you and everyone you care about are safe and healthy. Before we begin the conversation today, I'd like to cover two housekeeping items. Firstly, please say hi in the chat to let you know you can hear me. It's kind of lonely out here. And second, there are two parts and two Zoom links to our event today. The first link brought you into this webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we will ask you to exit and click on the second link for the breakout portion where you will meet your assigned coach. Thank you. Now, let's begin. 2020 Women on Boards is the leading education and research and advocacy movement to drive gender balance on the board of directors. But why does this matter? Well, number one, it's good for business. Numerous independent research studies have shown that public corporations with women on their boards outperform. So adding the talents and experience of women directors provides a competitive advantage. And with the convergence of the challenges we all face today, clearly having more women in leadership and on boards is just plain common sense. Number two, it's about the career advancement for all women. Historically, the corporate boardroom and top C-level positions have been off limits to women. Generations of us have worked hard to advance in our careers, only to be stopped at the boardroom. Serving on corporate boards is generally recognized as the pinnacle of business success, and women deserve to benefit from this service, just as men have for decades. Number three, it's about workplace culture. Today's corporations are increasingly aware they must address issues of pay disparity and discrimination that have diminished their corporate reputations. Having women on boards is a step towards addressing these issues and regaining the public trust. When women directors serve on boards, women employees look to them as role models, reinforcing and recognizing the contributions of women at all levels. And finally, it's just the right thing to do, no excuses. Now, today, you will hear from an amazing panel moderated by our very own Melody Meyer. Melody is known to many of us in the audience and has been an unwavering supporter of our work here in Houston. When asked to moderate our panel, Melody accepted without a moment's hesitation. Welcome, Melody. Now, before I hand over to you, Melody, let me share a little of your background. Melody retired from Chevron in 2016 after a distinguished 37-year career, serving as president of Chevron Asia Pacific in her last 5 years. As she moved into phase 2 of her career, she joined 3 public boards as a non-executive director for BP, ADV, and National Oil Varco, or NOV. She serves on the board of trustees for Trinity University and the National Bureau of Asian Research Board. She has 2 companies, Melody Meyer Energy and Women with Energy, to continue her work to speak, mentor, and advocate for the advancement of women. Thank you again, Melody, and over to you.
Thank you, Susie. It is really great to be here, and thanks for the introduction. And I want to say good morning to everyone and welcome to this fantastic event. When Susie said it's lonely out there, we saw the chat just going crazy. So you all are online and engaged, and it's fantastic. I am so honored to participate, and I really thank Women on Board 2020 for inviting me to moderate this important conversation, but most importantly with this very distinguished panel. This year, our theme is Women Directors in Time of Crisis. And if ever there was a year of crisis, this is it on many, many dimensions. And we'll be asking the panelists to share their experience. And as I'm talking, I'd like to invite the panelists to come into the call. So I will be inviting each panelist to touch on this topic by describing their personal thoughts and experience and why having women corporate directors on their board provides greater competitive advantage, especially in a time of crisis like now. Also, they'll be sharing insights on how to position for boards in the future, how to get onto boards, and the skills needed to be board ready. And believe me, if I'd had the opportunity 10 to 15 years ago in my career to hear from people like this on this panel, it would have helped me tremendously to better prepare to serve on corporate boards. So for those of you in the audience, I am so glad you're here and listening to this group. So you will have their bios. I'm going to do a very quick introduction, and I'm hopeful that all four of us are on the screen. So first, let me just introduce Marcela Donadio. Marcela's career was with Ernst & Young, and she advanced to lead the American oil and gas sector for E&Y. She retired and is now serving on the boards of Marathon Oil Company, National Oilwell Varco, and Norfolk Southern Corporation, along with other nonprofit boards. Dr. Luisa Palascos is the chairwoman of Citgo Petroleum Corporation and of Citgo's private foundation. Previously, she was a senior managing director for Medley Group Advisors, director for emerging markets research group at Barclays Capital, senior economist at Japan Bank, and an economist in risk management at Societe Generale. And our third panelist is Daryl Wilson. He led complex transformations at GE for 25 years, was a VP and a corporate officer for the company. And after leaving GE, he has founded the Wilson Collective Investments, an advisory firm that invests in startup businesses. He serves on the Next Era Energy Board, GenServe Board, the Dallas Federal Reserve Board, and is a strategic advisor to several companies. So let's get started. And I want to be sure that we're all four on the screen. Do I need to do anything to get us on the screen here? Okay, Marcela and Luisa, I assume you are on.
We are.
Okay, perfect. Absolutely. And maybe I need to go to gallery view. That's my problem. Okay. Fantastic. So let me start. And I gave a brief intro, but I really want to hear from you a bit about your background, what prepared you for board service, and how'd you get into corporate boards? And Marcela, let's start with you first.
Right. Thank you, Melody. I'm just as excited as you are to be here together with all of you. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about me and how I got on board. So Melody already shared that I spent my career at Ernst & Young, my entire professional career actually, and retired in 2014 after leading America's oil and gas sector for the firm. And, you know, I essentially brought to the process a very deep knowledge of financial issues, which made me an attractive candidate with respect to being on audit committees. And in fact, I'm on 3 audit committees, on all the audit committees of my boards. But in addition to that, I think I spent a fair amount of time really looking at strategic issues from an oil and gas perspective. And that has been incredibly instrumental to me in terms of serving on boards. Because while a lot of the work on boards happens at the committee levels, all the decisions are made at the board level. And I think that that's when it really helps to just bring a broad perspective, not only with respect to your functional experience, which in my case was very deep on the audit side, but also in terms of understanding strategy. So that led me to join the board of NOV in early 2014 upon my retirement, Marathon Oil later that year. And then I wanted my third board to actually be in something other than energy. And so it took a little bit of time, but I then joined the board of Norfolk Southern, which is a Class 1 railroad. And it's been fabulous because they're in the industrial segment. And it really does help to bring a lot of different perspectives. So there's a little bit of my background.
Thank you, Marcella. Luisa, can you do the same?
So first of all, thank you, Melody, for the introduction. And I'm so honored to be in this panel with both Marcella and Daryl. It's an honor, really, to be here. So my path, as you know, Melody, from conversations that we had previously, is very unique. So I'm going to tell a very different story, which I think underscores that there are many paths to becoming a board member. My background is in the intersection of finance, energy, and economics. And most of my career, what I've done is work for banks and financial institutions, but from very different perspective. I've worked for European banks. I worked for a Japanese bank. I worked for a multilateral bank. I worked both in the US and in Europe. So, and I worked for a financial consultancy firm in New York. So it is a very internationally diverse experience that helped me do a couple of things. So the first thing is that it solidified risk management experience, policy analysis. I would say that it also led me to market strategy, and it also allowed me to be confronted and study and have 25 years of experience in dealing with crisis from the point of view of investors. And so I've been exposed, because of the many different places that I've worked in, I've been exposed to many different crises, crisis of countries, crisis of industries, crisis of companies. And because of my experience in oil and gas, and particularly in oil exporting countries, and I'm talking about Middle East and Latin America mostly, and studying their national oil companies and the responses they've had to oil and boost cycles, it got me to be an expert on Citgo's shareholder. And so when it came time for Citgo's shareholder to appoint people at the board, I had become an expert. I had written articles. I had been a spokesperson for just oil exporting countries in crisis. And so through my expertise, is that I ended up getting appointed to this board. And our board was a very diverse board, also in terms of ages. And I was in the board with people that were 20 years my senior. And they have much better experience in the refining industry. But what I had was experience in crisis. And in the second part of the questions, we're going to talk about what that meant. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. And Daryl.
Thank you, and I'm also thrilled to be on this panel with such a distinguished set of participants. And then Sarah, Melody, and Susan, great planning, and thanks for all your support as we got prepared for this. But just a little bit about my background. I'm not from Texas. I'm a native of Shaker Heights, Ohio. I attended Baldwin-Wallace College with a degree in business with a concentration in accounting. That'll be important later. And I worked my way through college selling typewriters and copiers for IBM. Now, most of the people on the phone have no idea what a typewriter is, but we'll talk about that later. But I attended Indiana University to get my MBA, but I started my career at British Petroleum in their management development program. So I spent almost 7 years at BP in the oil and gas industry. And then after 7 years at BP, I went over to General Electric, and I kind of focused my career on transformations, building businesses around the world. And kind of like Luisa, I spent a disproportionate amount of my career outside the US in places like we lived in Budapest, Hungary 2 times, we lived in London, and we spent almost 5 years in Shanghai. And but it was always building capability and capacity in underserved markets and building capability to be able to deliver for our customers in those regions of the world. So I had the good fortune of being able to do that. But after 25 years, I retired and started my own business. But I'd say the critical thing and tools for me to be successful in boards is I sit on the NextEra board, but NextEra was my largest customer. And they're the largest renewables generator in the world, and they're the largest utility in the world. And they happen to be my largest customer. So it was a good transition. And it was a great network that we built while we were working at GE. I'd say other capabilities that kind of help you become kind of an expert in your space, also lends itself for you being appointed to boards. And I did, GE excluded you from being able to sit on for-profit boards. So for 25 years, I couldn't, but I sat on every nonprofit board that was available to me. And you talk about skill development and leadership tool development. Also, you build an incredible network. Those are the people who are in the boardroom who make decisions around who they advocate or suggest for board appointments. So, so again, that's how it happened for me. I sat on the first board, who's my largest customer. The other boards came from an extensive network, over 25 years of working, where people advocated for me as board positions came available.
Great, Daryl, thank you. So each of these panelists came into board service in such a diverse way, which is really outstanding for us to hear from. Next, we're going to talk about crisis. And Louisa, we're going to start with you because your ability on crisis management, as you described, was what led you into board service. But obviously, as you got into board service, the crises you've been managing, and particularly if you look at this year with the industry crises, the pandemic, the racial injustice, all of the things that we've dealt with. But can you share a little bit about your unique perspective on crisis and what you've dealt with, particularly with respect to Citgo?
So great. So I think the first thing is to give you a snapshot of what was it that we encountered when we first arrived in Houston. So we arrived and the company was facing very high near-term refinancing risks. We had lost 25% of our crude intake. We were facing significant reputational issues. We were facing significant regulatory risks. Our stock or our assets had been collateralized by our shareholders. So we were facing a lot of legacy problems and litigation. We had lost a big portion of our executive team. We had no CEO, no COO, no VP of legal, no auditor. The whole board had completely been removed. So we arrived, we were 6 people that didn't know each other, and we were all independent, except for one independent directors. This was the first time that a private company had appointed independent directors. And so let me fast forward you what happened in the 7 months, 9 months. So we understood very clearly that this was unprecedented and that it was not a typical board. So I think the first thing that we did was set up clear goals on how we were going to manage this crisis. And those clear goals determine all of our decisions. It was operational and financial stability, protection of assets, and enhancement of corporate governance. With those 3 goals, we started the job. 7 months later, we had refinanced 70% of our debt. We had averted rating downgrades. We had found a way to work with the regulatory issues that we have, which included sanctions. We had to establish a successful litigation or legal strategy to get out of a lot of legacy issues that we were dealing. We embarked in a very intense agenda of corporate governance. And one of the norths or the goals that we said, we were going to elevate this company to follow the best industry practices. And that meant understanding how public sector or public boards work and emulating and setting the corporate governance for independent directors to work similarly. And that also meant training ourselves and finding the best possible advice we could find on crisis management, on corporate governance, on training boards, and setting up processes that did not exist on how to select the CEO, how the board can follow also different committees that will select the CEO, the VP of legal, the auditor. I have to say that, again, after 7 months and 9 months, all of those things happened. We were able to stabilize the company. There are lingering issues, and we continue to deal with all of them at the same time. But those 3 goals that we set from the start of how we were going to filter all of our decisions were instrumental in getting through all of these things. There was a huge commitment from the board that we were going to do whatever it takes, and it was a service oriented and commitment type of board of getting the company through a very important partnership with management, so that we were all in the same page. And I have to say that we are very happy about all the things that we went through, but it did require a lot of dealing with things one at a time, and understanding within the whole strategy how to deal with each of them. And what I would say as well is that when you are in a board that is facing these kinds of crises, particularly of the unprecedented nature that we were facing, and I had the additional responsibility that I was chosen as the chair by the other board members, just because of my experience. So it was not only my experience in crisis, it's that it was the right background at the exact right time. And so what I understood, not only the things that were important as board members, it's the things that were important as chair. Also, I think meant that understanding crisis is understanding as well what kind of decisions you have to make, and understanding, and something that Marcela said, which I think I completely agree, which is thinking strategically, thinking about near-term risks, long-term risk, thinking about all your stakeholders, all your constituencies, and understanding that sometimes not everyone is in the same page, and everyone needs to have the same amount of information, needs to ramp up their knowledge about every single aspect, so that we as a board could make the best probable decisions, the best decisions within the context of a lot of uncertainty and unprecedented issues that we needed to sort out. So business judgment, which is something that Marcela has said a lot, but business judgment not only as an individual, but as a board, that the board is able to have a space where discussion, debate, understand, a clear understanding of all the issues that we're facing, the risks, the possible options and the possible scenarios, leads you to group thinking becoming a wise decision, and not adopting decisions that you then regret. So it's setting, I think, not only setting the strategy, having the right advice, understanding, having trusted management, but understanding, providing a space within the board for discussion and debate to take place, so that decisions that we take are the right decisions after significant understanding and significant thorough analysis of every single possible solution that we could have. Thank you.
Wow, what an intense experience over a short period of time with a very successful outcome, Luisa. Thank you for sharing that. Daryl, we're talking about crisis, but you also have tremendous experience with transformation throughout your career. And what crisis, / transformation experience might women bring to a board that you would consider a valuable addition to most boards?
Yeah, no, thanks, Melody. Unfortunately, I've spent a disproportionate amount of my career dealing with transformation or businesses in crisis. When you think about trying to lead change or drive businesses and build P&Ls outside North America, where headquarters were stationed, you're always in a state of transformation or challenge. And look, there's no shortage of crises today, but I just think there's some critical skills that we all have to bring as board members, and you have to cultivate, not just in times of crisis, but they have to be inherent in your capabilities. They just have to unpack those. And I think Luisa said it, you have to unpack those at the appropriate time. So when you think about clear thinking and vision, it's a requirement that's going to help you through the transformation or the crisis or not. You got to have great communication skills, be able to simplify a message and distill data and information down to its most granular bits, but also be able to communicate a solution. Business acumen. I think Marcella and Luisa talked about business acumen. You've got to be able to reach into a toolkit that allows you to push buttons and address the issue where it is. So business acumen, I think, is really important. Problem solving skills. You think about a crisis, you're in the middle of a gigantic problem. And so you've got to leverage every resource on the board and lead board directors or chairmen who are able to extract and leverage the capability that sits around the table are the ones that are most successful and can get through transformations or crisis. And then we don't talk enough about it, but stamina and energy. It's a marathon. And if you don't have the stamina to get through some of these crises, and you look around the world, what some companies are experiencing, you might sprint the first 50 yards and you're out of gas. And that means you can't get through the crisis. So stamina, energy, looking after your health of you and your employees is really important to get through some of these really tough problems. And then I just talk about collaboration. When you think about considering some of the boards that you participate in, you're really looking at the spirit of collaboration and teamwork and how the board interacts with the operating team. And that secret formula is what gets you through the crisis, how well you work together, how well you collaborate, how well you share information, how you support one another and provide the appropriate tools to get through a crisis. So look, those are just some of the skills that I think that any board member should have in their toolkit. But during a crisis, you've got to have these skills in abundance to make it through.
Thank you, Daryl. And of all the women on the call and the women in the industry, they have so many skills, but stamina and energy is one of those many skills. I can attest to that. So Marcella, you serve on 2 of your boards are energy related, which has had its own unique crisis in addition to many other things. Can you just share some of your experiences in crisis management on a board?
Absolutely. But first of all, let me just echo everything that Luisa and Daryl just said. I mean, it's a powerful attestation of what it means to be a board member during periods of crisis. In my case, the oil and gas industry is going through an incredibly difficult period, made worse by the backdrop of the pandemic. And so while energy is a cyclical industry, so we've seen a number of these cycles. This one's very intense because coupled with everything that's happening, then you have all the issues associated with the pandemic and the issues that impact your human capital. So look, as a board member, I think an important thing to understand is that management, to a large degree, even though Luisa's experience is very unique, but to a large degree, management is at the point of the spear when it comes to crisis management, right? So they are dealing with it day in, day out. They're seeing, real time the impact of the economic events and the, everything, the regulatory environment, everything that happens there. But in a crisis situation, board members need to bring all those skill sets and tools that Daryl talked about. And really because management needs to have a sound group of advisors that can essentially provide sage and thoughtful influences with respect to the decisions that are made. And coming together does require a tremendous amount of conversation, dialogue, and the ability to communicate those and bring the board to consensus. But we basically had to deal with and have to deal with capital allocation issues. You're having to deal with liquidity. You're having to deal with human capital issues. You're having to deal with whether or not the strategy needs to change in light not only of the pandemic and whether the strategy changes are short-term or longer term. And so the experience is very intense. Stamina is essential, but the ability to also not panic
Yeah.
in the midst of what is an incredibly difficult situation is very important. And I think what you bring to the table during those moments are all the things that Louisa and Daryl talked about. But I think the other thing you bring to the table is the ability to help management steer the ship without basically crashing to the shore or sinking. And it requires a lot of thoughtful analysis at the board level. The other thing that makes it somewhat challenging is that we as board members come together normally about, say, on average 6 times a year. And during crisis times, we come together a little bit more often. But again, management's at the tip of the spear of this thing. And so being able to really understand what they're going through so that you can give them the best advice is of paramount importance. So at the end of the day, in moments of crisis, the thing I think I value most is the ability for us to stay calm in the face of adversity so that good decisions can be made.
Great, Marcella, thank you. So before we go to next question, I'm going to ask Louisa a question from the audience. So given there were openings in key leadership roles within the company, how exactly did you partner with management during the turmoil, and who led the effort in communicating with the management team?
Okay, so I think, as Marcela said, our experience was very unique, right? Because we had lost a part of our management team. So we did have somebody that worked that we appointed as the interim person, but it was very important for us because this was a transformational mandate, also from the point of view of corporate governance, that we, even in the midst of this crisis, that we stop and do things, put processes in place, follow best practices, check internal control. So there were things that we could not rush. And so I think what Marcela just said is extremely important. Sometimes, even in the midst of crisis, you have to be able to see through what decisions need to be made immediately, but what decisions need to be made in the context of being able to set the right processes, to have the right people in place, have the right advice in place. And so in our case, we even if we needed all of these roles, it was very important for us to set the right process and to set it following the best practices. That was part, and I really took that mandate to heart. So it took us a while, but in the space of 7 months, we were able to appoint a CEO, a VP of legal, and the first woman general auditor that Citgo had. And I was very proud of that process, and we did it correctly, and we found the right people with the right set of skills that actually then took us to be able to manage much better from the management perspective the COVID-19 crisis. So we had the right people in place for this.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about skill sets in the boardroom. You've talked a lot about those that are needed for crisis. We're going to expand a little bit more, skill sets, diversity, and how boards are addressing investor expectations on ESG. So Marcella, I want to start with you. What experience do boards really value today? And how does diversity of the board and skill sets add value to ESG?
So let me start answer your last question first. So, diversity clearly has become an important issue, I would say, in the past 10 years, but has accelerated, I'd say, in the last 5. But I think the reason that that's really important from a board member perspective is that when you have a diverse group of board members, you are not all problem solving the same way. And there is tremendous value in that, tremendous value. And someone might have said it in one of our earlier panels, but I think Louisa referred to it too. The value of problem solving as a team is very, very important. Daryl talked about collaboration, and collaboration doesn't mean being a wallflower, by the way. Collaboration doesn't mean following the person with the loudest voice. Collaboration really means being able to have an honest conversation about the issues that are in front of us and being able to think through of all the people that are sharing their views, how we can build the best answer for the company, its shareholders, and the rest of its stakeholders, including the employees and the communities that we serve. So I would say that diversity is very helpful, because what I always find when we have board discussions is that, first of all, none of us problem solves the same way. But sometimes I've led and I've been able to get other board members to come to my way of thinking. And sometimes I've changed my mind based on something that they've said, some experience that they've had, something that ultimately I can step back. And that's why I keep talking about being calm. I can step back and think, that's actually a really good suggestion. And I can embrace the consensus answer as a result of that. I think the role of the lead director or chair of the board in this particular instance is also very important, because the boards that I think are the most successful are the ones where whoever is leading the conversation, or it's certainly managing it, allows for every voice to be heard, every single last one. And sometimes we sit there and we're pressured by timing and, we need to move on. And from my perspective, the SAGE chair or the SAGE lead director is the one that allows for really robust conversations in a time of crisis. Because if you need it often, in the time of crisis, you need it all the time. So, so that's one of the things in my perspective. And I think it's been, having a diverse board, in my opinion, really, really serves that cause very, very well in a moment of crisis.
Thank you, Marcela. Louisa, same question, but would you weave in some additional views of private company board skill sets and value of diversity and ESG responsibility, which, just as a reminder, everyone, it's environmental social governance, it's ESG. So Louisa?
Thank you. So there's two aspects of this that I'm going to touch upon. The first one is the social component of ESG, and the second one is the governance component. So from a governance component, I've spoken how important governance was in our agenda as board members. And it is important also from the point of view of diversity. Diversity is not only about numbers. Diversity is also about creating the right environment for people to do their best and be the best worker they can be. And so one of the things that was very important for us was to create a speak up culture, was to create we changed the code of conduct, we added ethics, we changed how the whistleblower system was working, and we now call it integrity hotline. We have made processes in place so people can speak up and talk about their experiences and are able to be able to be the best worker they can be without fear of anything, and that they are being respected. And so again, social inclusion, diversity is first of all about numbers, but it's also about creating the conditions for workers to feel safe and to feel safe about having a voice and speaking up. And that is really very important, was very important and continues to be very important for us and for me as a board member. The second thing is about corporate social responsibility. And I'm gonna bring it back to the COVID-19. I loved the experience of Daryl about nonprofits. I think really that this is a way that people have to start their experience in sports. I went the other way. I started at a board as a chair, and now I'm chair of the foundation that we have. You cannot imagine how important this has been in the context of COVID-19, where companies have to look at corporate social responsibility as one of their key values. This is not, I am very much in the movement of stakeholder capitalism, of looking at your constituencies and looking at all the stakeholders and providing value for all of them. And the foundation, I have to say, has been a transformative experience for me. We have been able to shift the foundation's mission and goals to care for vulnerable populations and focus on mothers and children. And I want to bring this point about that Marcela was talking about. I'm not only a woman, and that brings already a very different point of view at the board. I'm a mother. I'm a mother of school-age children. So I know what working moms are going through in this pandemic. They have a voice in me in the boardroom. You have no idea how important that is. So that I am able to speak for the hundreds of women working moms that are having to deal with COVID-19. But in the foundation, and that comes from my background in economics, I know how important women education is for development. So it's another way to bring not only diversity, but the importance of that women advancing in society, all society advances.
Boy, thank you, Luisa. Boy, and thank you so much for bringing in that perspective about women with children and families during this current crisis, and our corporate responsibility to understand that and help those women succeed. Daryl, I'm going to turn to you. Same question around how boards are addressing investor expectations on ESG, but maybe also weave in how additional points about how women might augment their skill sets and leadership to better position for board service.
Yeah, thanks, Melody. And Luisa and Marcella have done such a splendid job of covering this topic. I thought I'd address it a different way. I've been really fortunate to be mentored on boards by great board members with tremendous business acumen, and they just happen to be women. So I thought I would highlight some of their characteristics and a little bit of their background. And I think I hope it'll highlight for people just some of the skills, and I'd say that they've developed over time. And I've got a tremendous amount of respect and have learned a lot. Our lead director, her name is Sherry Barat. She's been on the NextEra board for 22 years. She's doing her second term as the lead director. She sits on she's the chair of the comp committee. She's on the executive committee. Sherry has a unique set of skills around inclusiveness, because over 22 years, she's sat on the outside of the conversation, and she knows what it feels like to be either marginalized or to sit on the fringes. So she does a wonderful job of, I think Marcella said it, extracting from every board member their core assets to make sure you get to the right decision. She's calm, she's steady, she's a mom, she's extraordinarily conscious about work-life balance and societal issues. So it's just been a real treat to learn from Sherry as she sits in the lead director seat. There's another mentor of mine. Her name is Amy Lane. She's been on the NextEra board for 5 years. She shares the finance and investment committee. She's a former managing director for Merrill Lynch Retail and Solomon Brothers. And Amy is detailed, she's analytical, she's thorough, she's outspoken. So there's no detail that slips past Amy without her pulling it back to make sure that the right attention is focused on it. She's persistent. So if the page flips, she's willing to reverse to make sure that we've given the proper attention to it. So she drills in. So it's just skills that help me become a better board member as I see it live out in the boardroom. There's another person who's a good mentor of mine and good friend, and it's not on a for-profit board, but her name is Ann Stern. She's the chairman of the board for Good Reason Houston. And the reason I'm on the Good Reason Houston board is because Ann told me to. So I gotta do what she tells me to do. And but it's because I met her on the Houston Fed board. I found her to be thoughtful and engaging, and so easy to find ways to latch on. And but just thoughtful, brilliant, able to create consensus and build a team and focus people around things that are really important. So look, I just mentioned those characteristics because you talk about augmenting skills. Look, there's skills that some other people need to have in the boardroom, but I just think women on boards or people who are diverse bring a different experience. So either that's a mom, caring for children, or if you look at some of the societal issues that we face as people of color, we bring a different nuance and perspective to the room. And if we're not in the room, we make decisions that I'd say aren't 100% included. So that's just would be my perspective on some of those skill augmenting tools.
Thank you, Daryl. Fantastic. So we're going to move into our last question, and I'm watching for questions from the audience too, but we'll incorporate any of those. But I want to start with you, Daryl, again, and just say, really, what advice would you give to women? And we've got a lot of women on this call that are thinking about, how do I position myself through the last part of my career in executive service to position for board service? What advice would you give them about how to position yourself, or how to get on your first board, or once you do, how to become an outstanding board member? So Daryl, you want to start?
Sure. I talked about it a little bit earlier. To position yourself for boards, the best way is to actually do it. So look, every nonprofit is short of resources. There's no nonprofit that has an abundance of capability and resource. So I suggest that you seek those out. You make it personal. I mean, when you're volunteering and you're working for free, the tendency is, if it's something that's more personal to you, you'll commit more time and energy. But I just think every nonprofit needs our help and the business acumen that you bring, because they're running small businesses is how to think about it. And that's how you develop your skill. I think you need to network like crazy. And because, look, board service for profit is an insider's game. It's the people who are around the table making suggestions to the governance and nominating committee. And if you're on some of these nonprofit boards with people who are on these for-profit boards, it gives you an insight. But while you're working on these nonprofit boards, you have to perform. So you have to bring the energy, the insight. You got to be on time. You got to show up for meetings. All those things that are important as you're looking for your next job. So I think you got to network, you got to perform. And then I think you got to take advantage of these resources. I mean, women on boards, this is fantastic. I'm already stealing these ideas to think about how we can use it, for diversity on boards. But this is fantastic. You got all the resource that is sitting around the Zoom call that you can tap into and ask for support or make recommendations. NACD is another place where you don't have to be a corporate director to take advantage of all the tools and resources as you look to as you aspire to be on another board. So look, those are a couple things, and but there's a plethora of opportunities out there that you can tap into, and it's just to be ready for boards, you have to go do it. And you have to give of your time and energy to take advantage of it.
Daryl, thank you. Fantastic. Louisa, let's go to you. What advice would you give the women in the audience about how to position themselves, get on their first board? And also there was a question in the audience about, have there anyone experienced imposter syndrome? So you might touch on that too, if you have any thoughts in that area.
So, again, because of my very unique path towards boardrooms, I think probably Daryl has a much better idea of the normal path. But I am going to mention three things that I think are very relevant. And I think, at least from the point of view of a private sector board, what were the, I mean, they were men that decided that I had to be in that board. So mentors and men mentors along with women mentors, I think really, really helped, because it was the reason why I'm here. But Daryl said something that I really, really like, and I completely agree, which is engaging. My experience in the board is that the board is the stewardship of a company. It's the best, it's the most incredible way to serve on an organization. And so you have to be, in my view, you have to be able, and you have to understand that you have to be engaged in your own space. So are you somebody that only works and understands their colleagues and their department? No, engage yourself and put yourself in the position of being part of ad hoc teams within your organization that see across departments. Go to town halls with the CEO, ask questions. Is that in the board, you really have to understand the whole of the organization, and you have to be engaged. So be engaged in your work, in your work environment. Be that person that cares much more than your department. Care about the company and show that. I think that's a very important way to start to showcase your interest, is to be engaged. The second thing that I would say is that you do have to become an expert and you have to have a core competency in your field. And I think we have discussed, Marcela and I, this before, is that in both of our cases, we went and spoke, and so Daryl is talking about networking. I went in every panel that people invited me to talk about my areas of expertise. I was in the media. I participated in student things. So you have to become a name for yourself outside of your workplace. And so that is something that you will do for your career, but that actually is the way that I got into the board without really knowing. It is becoming an expert in my field and other people and the networking that entails. The third thing that I want to touch upon, something that both Marcela and Daryl touch upon, is that soft skills are so important in the boardroom. And so being able to communicate your thoughts effectively, being able to listen, it's extreme. This is not about you. There's no space and there's no room for ego in the boardroom. It's about the company. So you have to be able to listen. And Marcela said something that I completely agree on. You have to be flexible. Sometimes you do change your mind and you have to be able to take on new information. What does that mean about where we're going? So you have to be flexible. You have to listen to others. And Daryl talk about collaboration. This is a collaborative experience. And so getting along with people. I mean, in my previous experience, I worked for many companies, many nationalities. I put myself out of my comfort zone. That paid off. I arrived with a group of 6 people that I didn't know, and we had to immediately develop a working environment. So showing that you can work in any kind of environment with any kind of people, even under difficult circumstances, I think positions you as well for boards. Thank you.
Fantastic, Luisa. Just be a visible thought leader, soft skills, nonprofit experience from Daryl. So Marcela, you're going to take us home here. So I want you to just share what advice you would give the people on this call on how to position themselves to get into board service and how they might become really strong board members.
So I'm struggling to think of anything that Daryl and Luisa haven't already said, but so I want to reemphasize everything that they said. In addition to that, I would say that you need, and Luisa touched on this, you need to develop your own profile. You need to own your voice. You need to be confident in using that voice. And you need to be able to have this deep core competency that Luisa speaks about. You can develop it a number of different ways. I actually, much like Daryl talked about, served on a number of not-for-profit boards when I was with the firm because we couldn't serve on public boards, and learned a lot by doing that. My experience as an audit partner also gave me a lot of exposure to audit committee and to the board members there. But the one thing that I would say, and I want to address this issue of the imposter syndrome. You know what? You're not an imposter. You know a ton. You can go toe-to-toe with anybody, and you need to use your voice. I will tell you that maybe this is my problem, but I don't suffer from the imposter syndrome because the fact that I'm on a board seat means I earned it. And if you earn a seat at the table, you should never feel like an imposter, and you should never be afraid to speak up your mind. Collaboration is very important. Collaboration does not mean having strong and robust conversations. And some of them are hard. Yeah. And you don't always agree. but you need to have moral conviction that you're there for a reason, and you need to lead courageously. And so I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you. I promised a fantastic panel and they over delivered far beyond that. So I just really want to thank you, Daryl, Louisa, Marcella, fantastic job. I think the audience has got to earn so much insight, learn so much from all of you. I just want to say that, you know, again, I'm so excited that everyone on this call is here, and I am going to turn it over to Susan or Stephanie. I'm not as well prepared for my turnover. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. It's Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
No worries, no worries. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah DeJay Willis, and it's been an honor to co-chair this year's 2020 Women on Boards event alongside Susie Knight and Catherine Warren. What an amazing morning this has been so far, especially knowing that we have record-breaking participation. Daryl, Louisa, Marcella, Melody, thank you for your incredible insight and perspective on women directors in a time of crisis, and the best is yet to come. That being said, I'd like to take the next few moments to recognize everyone that made today's event possible, starting with our Houston sponsors. That includes our platinum sponsors, Merrill Lynch Wealth Management and Cheniere, our gold sponsor, Marathon Oil, our silver sponsor, Kirkland and Ellis, and our bronze sponsors, King & Spalding, Reed Smith, and Gibson Dunn, as well as our alliance partner, Women's Energy Network. Additionally, we would also like to recognize this year's national sponsors, which include Bank of America, EY, McKinsey, RBC Wealth Management, and BNY Mellon. Thank you for your support, and we hope you will consider joining us again next year. In addition, we would also like to thank this year's 2020 Women on Boards Leadership Committee for their fearless support and personal contribution. This year's leadership committee is comprised of the following individuals: Mary Zapone, Laura Fulton, Robin Fielder, Jeanette Marks, Judy Clark, Elizabeth DeSteffens, and myself, Sarah DeJay Willis. And finally, we would like to especially recognize all of our 29 amazing directors and coaches who have donated their personal time as well as their expertise in support of our impactful cause to diversify the boardroom. Each director coach, all of whom can be found on our Houston 2020 Women on Boards website, has an insightful guidance to share and a story worth hearing. It's been an absolute honor working so closely with each and every one of you this year, especially amidst this virtual environment. I say this now in hopes of inspiring today's participants to seize the opportunity to expand their knowledge and network in pursuit of the boardroom. Because bottom line, diversity is power, and the first step is joining the conversation today. So thank you for being here as we mark a milestone year in celebration of our 10th anniversary of 2020 Women on Boards. This in mind, please join me in welcoming Stephanie Sonnabend and Molly Guerra, the founders of 2020 Women on Boards, for the most up-to-date statistics on board diversity here in Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. What an interesting and informative panel. I'm Stephanie Sonnabend.
And I'm Molly Guerra, and we are the co-founders of 2020 Women on Boards. We're pleased to be with you in Houston today. And Daryl, I agree. It took a lot of stamina and energy to get beyond that 20% goal. Stephanie?
When we started the campaign in 2010, we were dismayed by the lack of progress women were making joining corporate boards. In 2011, the percentage of women on the Russell 3000 companies, which are the largest publicly traded companies in the US, was 10.6% and hadn't changed significantly in the past decade. So year over year, we've been reporting on the number of women on corporate boards on the Russell 3000, which we feature in our Gender Diversity Index and database published annually on the website. Since we started the campaign, the percentage of women in the Russell 3000 has steadily increased. In the past 4 years, going from 16.0% nationally to 22.6% women on the Russell 3000 boards in 2020. We achieved our goal of 20% in 2019. At the same time, the percentage of women in the Russell 3000 companies headquartered in Texas has increased from 13.0% to 20.1% in the same 4 years, 2017 through 2020. Among the 25 states in the US that have had more than 20 companies on the Russell 3000, all but 2, Florida and Utah, exceed the 20% goal for women on their boards this year. The states that achieved more than 20% for the first time are Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. Yes, Texas. However, of the 100 companies in the Houston metro area, the percentage of women on corporate boards is 19.4%. So while Houston area companies are not quite at 20%, 31 women joined boards in Houston companies just in the past year. There are 254 companies on the Russell 3000 headquartered in Texas, and 136, or 54%, are what we call winning companies at 20% or greater women on their boards. There is a total of 435 women on Russell 3000 company boards headquartered in Texas. So imagine all Texas companies on the Russell 3000 were at 20% or greater. All that is needed is between 149 and 184 women, depending on whether they add a seat or retire a man. Now, I believe there's that many people currently on this call, so there's no dearth of qualified women to serve on boards here in Texas. This year, we're celebrating our success and the completion of our first phase of the campaign. Yet we all know that the 20% goal is no longer good enough. As Melody Dobson said at the Global Conversation last week, we're pleased, but not satisfied. Here to tell you about where we go from here is my good friend and co-founder, Mally Giro.
Thank you, Stephanie. So if 20% isn't good enough, well, what is? In 2021, our campaign will advocate for parity on boards, what we call gender balance. It's a bold goal, but we have the stamina and the energy to rise to the challenge. So where are we now? Nationally, 163 out of 2,932 Russell 3000 companies are gender balanced, about 5%. In Texas, 10 out of 254 have achieved gender balance, and in Houston, 2 companies have gender balanced boards. So you see, we really have our work cut out for us. Our vision is that all public company boards will be gender balanced, with women holding half of all corporate board seats. And we want that to be a model, not just for corporate boards, but for private boards and private company boards, nonprofit board, and trade and government advisory boards and commissions. To support this new vision, as of January, we are changing our name to 50/50 Women on Boards. So we'll have a new name, but we're going to have the same core values: to educate, collaborate, and advocate for more women on boards. Our highly popular virtual Get On Board workshops will resume in February 2021 on Zoom. And in the first quarter of 2021, we are very excited and pleased to announce a new program, Path to the Boardroom, for women mid-career who are looking to serve on boards within the next 5 to 10 years. So you can find out more about us, our campaign, our programs, our research on our website at 2020wob.com. Join us in this conversation on Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook. It's the conversation that drives this forward. So thank you all. Here to close this portion of the event and to tell you about the breakout sessions is Catherine Warren.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Molly, for sharing. We are so pleased that you were able to join us this morning, and thank you for your leadership in this topic. Okay, we're ready for the second part of our event, where we will all meet in our planned breakout rooms. So every breakout room is led by a director coach who is a leader in the Houston business community and has been chosen because he or she has a wealth of experience and information to share with you. So be ready to introduce yourself and engage with your group. When the breakout room sessions are done, it's the end of our event today. So on behalf of Susie, Sarah, and the entire Houston team, thank you very much for your support and engagement. And we look forward to seeing you in person in 2021. So now you're going to exit the first Zoom webinar link in your calendar invite, and you're going to click on the second one in your invitation, which is going to take you to your assigned breakout room, which will start in 5 minutes. If you need any help or have any technical difficulties, in that same invite is a help link that you can click on. You can also email events@2020womenonboards.com. Both registrants and director coaches, feel free to reach out to those 2 points if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll begin again soon in 5 minutes. Bye-bye.